Some wounds don't bleed. They just stay open. My name is Peter Holloway. I'm 63 years old, a retired Army Staff Sergeant, and now a night patrol officer for the County Sheriff's Department. After 24 years in uniform, peace and stillness never came easy, so I keep serving in the only way I know how. My wife, Claire, passed away 10 years ago, cancer, slow and merciless. She was the one who held our home together, especially when my duty took me far from it. When she died, the house became too big, too quiet. 5 years ago, I sold it, kept nothing but her wedding ring, her Bible, and one photo of the three of us taken before life, pulled us all in different directions. Our son Matthew didn't come home when she was dying. He didn't visit after she passed. He blamed me for being deployed too often, for choosing the Army, for being a father built from structure and duty instead of softness and time. He said I cared more about soldiers than I ever cared about him. 7 years ago, standing on my doorstep with anger shaking through him, he said the last words I heard from him. "You were never there, so don't expect me to be." Then he left. No calls, no texts. Birthdays, holidays, funerals, silence. That Tuesday evening started like any other. I was packing my thermos for shift. Coffee, black, no sugar, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Could have been anyone. Dispatch, spam, wrong number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, a gut feeling soldiers learn to respect, made me pick up. "Hello?" There was a breath on the line, then a voice I knew deep in my bones. "Dad." Not soft, not apologetic, just expectant. "Matthew." I kept my voice steady. "Been a long time." He ignored everything but his purpose. "I need $200,000, he said flatly. "I'm in trouble, bad trouble, and you're going to help me." I leaned against the counter. "How did you get into debt that deep?" "That's not the point. The point is, you have the house. Sell it." It hit me then. He assumed everything was frozen in time, that the house still belonged to me, that the ghost of our old life still stood waiting. "I sold that house years ago," I said, quiet. Then disbelief. "No, you didn't." "Yes, 5 years ago." His voice sharpened, defensive and accusing all at once. "You're lying. You wouldn't just sell the house, Mom's house." "I did, because I couldn't live there anymore." I took a breath. "I'm not giving you the money." Another long pause, then a bitter, familiar shift. "You owe me. For all the years you weren't around. For every time I needed you, and you chose the Army instead." The words were meant to wound, but I'd carried worse. "Matthew," I said quietly, "I'm sorry your life is hard right now, but your choices are not mine to fix." Silence, then a cold, deliberate sentence. "You'll regret this." And the line went dead. 3 hours later, while on patrol, my phone buzzed with an automated alert from the sheriff's system. "Burglary or active property damage address, 427 Birchwood Lane." My old address. My pulse kicked up. I requested backup, hit the lights, and sped toward the scene. When we arrived, headlights swept across shattered windows. Glass glittered across the lawn. Furniture fragments littered the porch. Spray-painted words stretched across the siding. Rage scrawled loud and thoughtless. Inside, something crashed, hard. My partner Daniels went around back while I approached the broken entryway. Through the busted window, I saw a figure wielding a baseball bat, swinging again and again into what used to be a coffee table. His shoulders heaved. His breath came fast. Rage, not chaos, guided his movements. I stepped inside. "Sheriff's Department," I commanded. "Drop the weapon." The man froze. Slowly he turned. And though he didn't recognize me, not yet, I recognized him instantly. My son. Mud on his face. Sweat soaking his shirt. Eyes full of the same resentment he'd carried years ago. Daniels came through the back, weapon drawn. Matthew didn't resist, just stared, stunned, as cuffs locked around his wrists as Daniels read him his rights. The homeowner, a man I'd never met, stood shaking near the doorway, staring at the destruction of his home. And then it happened. Daniels asked the standard question, "Anything you want to say about why you did this?" Matthew jerked his chin toward me and spat. This house belonged to my father. He should have helped me. He left me no choice. The homeowner blinked. That house hasn't been Peter Holloway's for 5 years. Matthew froze, every muscle locking. Slowly, finally, his eyes lifted to meet mine. Confusion, shock. Then something worse. Realization. In that ruined living room, surrounded by shattered glass and consequences, he finally understood. He hadn't destroyed my home. He destroyed a stranger's. And now, there was no one left to blame. Not even me. The drive back to the station was quiet. Daniels rode in the passenger seat, fingers drumming lightly against his thigh. A habit officers pick up after too many tense calls. Behind us, separated by steel and plexiglass, my son stared straight ahead. No yelling, no excuses, no anger, just silence. For a moment, just a moment, he looked 12 again. The same expression he wore the day he broke the neighbor's window with a baseball and waited for me to come home to deal with it. Only this time the damage wasn't a window, and I wasn't coming home. When we pulled into the Sallyport, Daniels opened the back door and guided Matthew out. His wrists were cuffed, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. I watched him walk ahead of me. My son, escorted by 2 deputies in a building I had walked into every night for 8 years. A place I came to serve, not to save. Inside, booking went by the book. Photographs, prints, property inventory. The officer handling intake didn't know the connection between us. I hadn't said a word, and neither had Matthew. When they finished, the intake officer looked at me. Sergeant Holloway, you good to take his statement? Or you want us to assign someone else since you were responding? The question hung there, heavy. Regulations gave me an out. But I shook my head. I'll take it. Matthew didn't react. Not a blink, not a breath shift. If he was surprised, he hid it well. We moved to interview room 2, a box-sized space with a camera mounted high on the corner wall and a table bolted to the floor. I stayed standing for a moment, hands resting on the chair back. Not aggressive, not soft. Neutral. When I finally sat, I pressed the recorder button. Interview with suspect Matthew Holloway. Date November 14th, 22:48 hours. Officer conducting interview, Sergeant Peter Holloway. For the first time since the arrest, Matthew looked directly at me. There was no hatred there. No apology either, just something tired. I folded my hands. You understand this conversation is being recorded and can be used in court? He nodded, yeah. State your full name for the record. He did. Then silence again. I cleared my throat. Tell me why you were at 427 Birchwood Lane tonight. He leaned back, jaw tightening. I told you, I needed money. Not from the homeowner. His eyes flashed. I thought it was yours. His voice cracked. Not loud, not dramatic, just raw. I thought, he shook his head. I thought you still lived there. I thought everything was still the same. The truck in the driveway, the front flower bed, the stupid blue wind chimes. They belong to the current owners. He swallowed hard. I know that now. There was a pause. I could hear the hum of the air vent, the soft scratch of his cuff chain against the chair. Why not just knock at the door? I asked. His laugh was humorless. You think you would have opened it? Maybe. No, he whispered. You wouldn't have. He wasn't wrong. He rubbed his forehead with cuffed hands, frustration burning through him. I panicked. They're calling. They're threatening. I thought, if I could scare you enough to give me what I needed, maybe everything would stop. I stared at him. You thought destroying my home would make me help you? He didn't answer. Not verbally. But the silence was an answer of its own. Years of resentment, years of blame. Every deployment, every missed birthday, every homecoming that didn't fix what was broken. He had kept all of it stored like ammunition. I took a steady breath. Your debt, where did it come from? He hesitated. Bad investments. Gambling? A long pause. Yes. I nodded slowly. Your wife? She left. His voice was barely there. 2 months ago, another piece, another wound. He leaned forward suddenly, cuffs scraping the table. I didn't think it would end like this. I looked at him, not as an officer, not even as a father, but as a man who had seen countless soldiers break under the weight of their own choices. Matthew, I said quietly, it ended long before tonight. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, his shoulders dropped. Not defiant, not proud. Defeated. When the interview ended, I turned off the recorder and stood. A deputy entered, unlocking the cuffs and preparing to escort him to holding. As they walked him toward the door, Matthew paused, not turning fully, just enough for me to hear him. Dad, I didn't think you'd be the one showing up tonight. I answered honestly, I wish I hadn't been. And then he was gone. I stayed in that empty interview room long after the door shut. Not because I didn't know what came next, but because I did. Some battles aren't fought with weapons. Some are fought with memory, regret, and the weight of what we couldn't fix. And this one wasn't over yet. Morning came too early. I'd barely slept. Just lay in bed listening to the furnace kick on and off, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Matthew had spoken in that interview room. It was strange how a grown son could look like a stranger and still feel like a wound. By 8 a.m., I was in uniform and at the courthouse. Because I was the responding officer, I had to be there. Because I was his father, I wasn't sure if I should be. The hallway outside courtroom 2B smelled like burnt coffee and floor polish. Lawyers in suits stood in clusters, whispering deals and timelines. A bailiff stood with a clipboard, checking names. Everything operated the way bureaucracies always do. Steady, emotionless, unmoved by the human mess around it. I took a seat in the back, far from the prosecution table and far from where the victim. The new homeowner, a man named Daniel Ward, sat with an insurance representative. I hadn't spoken to him yet, though I knew I needed to. That conversation would come later. 10 minutes passed before the bailiff opened the side door and brought in the first group of detainees. Shackles clinked faintly. An orange jumpsuit stood out sharp against polished wood and suits. Matthew was the last one through. His wrists were cuffed again, chain clipped to the waistband of his jumpsuit. His eyes scanned the room. First the judge's bench, then the attorneys, then the victim. Finally me. He didn't look away, not angry, not defiant, just tired. The judge, a woman with silver hair pulled tight and glasses low on her nose, called the case. State versus Matthew Holloway. The prosecutor read the charges: breaking and entering, criminal property destruction, intent to intimidate, felony vandalism, estimated damage, $82,475. I watched my son lower his gaze as the numbers landed. The judge turned to him. Mr. Holloway, do you understand the charges filed against you? Yes, Your Honor. His voice sounded smaller than I'd ever heard it. A public defender stepped forward, young, nervous, likely handling too many cases at once, and tried to negotiate bail. He argued Matthew wasn't a danger to the community, that he had panicked under financial pressure, that it was a misguided attempt to communicate rather than malicious intent. Then the prosecutor responded. She laid out the timeline, the threatening tone, the property damage, the premeditation implied by spray paint brought to the scene. Then came the part I had dreaded. She read aloud the recorded statement where Matthew admitted he'd intended to scare the homeowner, thinking he was scaring me. A ripple went through the room. Even after years in law enforcement, hearing your child's worst choices spoken flatly into a courtroom carries a weight words aren't designed to hold. Then the judge asked the homeowner if he wished to speak. Daniel Ward stood. He wasn't angry, not outwardly. His voice was controlled, steady. I bought that house because I wanted a safe place to raise my family. My wife and I brought our newborn daughter home 2 weeks before this happened. She was in the room next to where he smashed the windows. The courtroom shifted. Even the public defender straightened. Daniel swallowed. I don't know this man. I've never met him. But he didn't just break glass and furniture. He took away the feeling that our home is safe. My wife is afraid to sleep downstairs. We had to stay in a hotel for 2 nights. I can't put a price on that. He sat down quietly. Matthew's shoulders caved in. The judge removed her glasses and folded her hands. Mr. Holloway, this was not an accident, not an impulsive act. This was targeted destruction. You may not have intended to harm the residents physically, but you harmed their security, their peace, their trust in their own home. A long pause. Given the seriousness of the charges, the admitted intent, and the financial risk associated with the defendant attempting to flee due to existing debt, bail is denied. This case will proceed to pretrial. The gavel struck. Just like that, it was real. The bailiff approached Matthew, unlocking him from the bench restraint. He didn't resist, didn't speak, but just as he reached the hallway door, he stopped and turned his head. Not fully, just enough to see me. His voice was barely audible over the room emptying around us. I didn't think it would go this far, I answered quietly. It didn't have to. He stared at me, eyes tired, skin drawn, like a man carrying years of anger he no longer had the strength to hold. Then he nodded. Not agreement, not apology, just acknowledgement. As the door closed behind him, I felt something settle. Not forgiveness, not peace, but acceptance. Some fathers get to teach their sons how to ride a bike. Some teach them how to shave or fix a fence. Me? I was teaching mine what consequence looks like, and God help me, it was the hardest lesson of all. A week passed, a week of long shifts, paperwork, insurance calls, and restless sleep. A week of replaying things I wished I had said years ago, before bitterness took root in my son and silence became our only language. The sheriff's department received updates about the case daily. Pre-trial was scheduled in 2 months. Damage assessments were still being finalized, but the numbers weren't getting any softer. Repairs, security upgrades, cleanup, replacements. $82,475 was turning into $91,300 and climbing. The homeowner, Daniel Ward, had been patient and respectful every time I spoke with him, which somehow made everything harder. He never blamed me, not once, but I could feel the unspoken question, how does a father become a stranger to his own son? I didn't have an answer. On the 8th day, the jail contacted me. Sergeant Holloway, inmate Matthew Holloway, has requested a visitor. He listed you. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. I didn't say yes immediately. I told the officer I'd call back. Then I sat in my truck in the station parking lot, watching snow drift across the windshield. Seeing him again wouldn't fix anything, but avoiding him wouldn't either. 10 minutes later, I called back. I'll come during lunch. Jail visits aren't like they show on television. They're structured, routine, stripped of drama. Conversations happen through reinforced glass, monitored by cameras, timed to the minute. When I walked into the visitor area, only one booth was occupied. Matthew's. He was already seated, elbows on the metal desk, eyes fixed on the glass, but not fully looking at me yet. I sat across from him. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. He was the one who finally broke the silence. You look older. A humorless smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. That happens. He nodded, gaze dropping to his hands. His voice, when he spoke again, was quieter. I didn't expect you to come. You asked. So? So I showed up. He looked up then, really looked not guarded, not angry, curious, maybe even confused. I thought you were done with me. I was never done with you, I said, but I stopped chasing someone who didn't want to be found. He swallowed hard. For the first time since that night, I saw regret, not the performative kind, not the court-mandated kind, but the heavy kind, the kind that steals sleep. I messed up, he whispered. Yes, I answered. You did. He waited, as if expecting me to soften the truth. I didn't. You put a family in danger, I continued. You destroyed property. You terrified people who had nothing to do with your anger. I know. And you could have killed someone, I added. If someone had been near that window when you broke it, if the homeowner had come downstairs, you could be facing more than vandalism. His jaw tightened. I wasn't thinking. You haven't been thinking for a long time, Matthew. The words landed heavy. He leaned back, exhaling hard. When Mom died, he began, voice unsteady, I didn't know how to talk to you. Every time I saw you, all I saw was your uniform. All I could think was, you chose that over us. I nodded slowly. I know. That startled him. You do? Yes, I said. But you were wrong. I didn't choose the army instead of you. I chose to serve. And I hoped you'd grow up understanding that service isn't abandonment. His eyes glossed. Not tears, but a sting of truth. I kept waiting for you to apologize, he murmured. For what? For being gone. I held his gaze. And I kept waiting for you to understand that I never stopped being your father, even when I wasn't home. Silence stretched thin and fragile. Then he said something I never expected. Not after years of distance, resentment, and one very broken house. I don't want this to be the end. My throat tightened, but I stayed steady. It doesn't have to be. But I screwed everything up. Yes, I answered. And now you fix it. He frowned. How? You start by taking responsibility fully. No excuses, no blame, no shortcuts. He nodded slowly, processing. And after that? He asked. After that, I said quietly, you rebuild not with demands, not with threats, with effort, one piece at a time. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, but could you come again? Visit, I mean. The question wasn't angry or entitled. It was hopeful, tentative, human. I let the silence settle before answering. Yes. He blinked, once. Like the word hit deeper than it should have. A guard walked over, signaling time was up. Matthew stood, hesitating before turning away. Just before the door opened, he glanced back. I'm glad you sold the house, he said quietly. So am I. And then he was gone. As I walked out into the cold winter air, one thought stayed with me. Some battles aren't won, some aren't lost. Some simply begin again, slowly, painfully, but with a chance. And that was more than I expected. Winter turned to spring before anything moved forward. Pre-trial hearings, negotiations, insurance reports, victim statements, everything took time. I kept working my shifts, kept showing up for visits when Matthew asked, and slowly, cautiously, the conversations changed. He stopped asking for money. He stopped blaming. Mostly he listened. And for the first time in years, we spoke like two men trying to rebuild something. Not salvage the past, but shape whatever future was still possible. The legal outcome landed in late April. His attorney called me before I heard it through the department. Your son won't get prison time, she said. The victim agreed to an alternative sentencing proposal. I exhaled, slow, steady. What kind of alternative? Restitution, mandatory counseling, 2 years probation, and she paused as if waiting for my reaction. 480 hours of community service. I knew enough to read between the lines that wasn't leniency. That was a structured second chance. He'd have to work for it. Good. The next week, I met him outside the jail as he was released. No cameras, no family waiting, just the two of us, standing under a sky that smelled faintly of rain. He looked thinner, but clearer somehow. Free man, I said. He gave a quiet, ironic laugh. Doesn't feel like it. It's not freedom yet, I replied. It's permission. He nodded, accepting that truth. We walked toward my truck, not because he asked for a ride, but because I offered. Halfway there, he slowed. I heard something, he said carefully, about the victim. I waited. He wants me to help rebuild what I destroyed. I nodded. Yes, it was his request when the prosecutor asked for sentencing input. He swallowed. He wants me to repair the house, the fence, the windows. All of it. Matthew let out a breath. Not frustrated, not angry, just humbled. Do you think I can do it? I didn't answer immediately. Finally, I said, you don't start with everything. You start with the first broken piece. 2 days later, I drove him to Birchwood Lane. He stood on the sidewalk a long time, staring at the house he destroyed. Not as an enemy, not as a victim of circumstance, but as a man facing consequence. Daniel Ward came out on the porch. His wife remained behind him, holding their daughter, no hostility, just wary distance. Matthew approached slowly. When he reached the porch steps, he stopped. I'm sorry, he said, not rushed, not rehearsed. Not because the court told me to say it, not because it helps me. I'm sorry because I took something from you I had no right to take. Daniel nodded. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. Then fix it, Matthew nodded. I will. They shook hands, not warm, not forgiving, but firm a beginning. Work started the following Saturday. Not glamorous work, not quick work, just steady progress. Broken glass removed, frames sanded, paint stripped, fencing measured, lumber cut. Sometimes I stood back and watched quietly. Sometimes I helped. Not because he needed me, but because he finally wanted me there. Hours passed with little talking. Sometimes silence is its own kind of healing. Around noon, as we rebuilt the first section of fencing, Matthew leaned on the shovel and looked at me. You know, he said, when I was younger, I used to wait for you to come home so I could show you things I built. Birdhouses, forts, that kind of stuff. I kept working, but I listened. I stopped building things when you stopped being around. I wiped dirt from my gloves. Maybe it's time to build again. His eyes lifted. With you? If you want. He didn't answer right away, but his shoulders loosened, his breathing steadied, and after a moment, he picked up another post and set it into the ground beside mine together. Not talking, not rushing. We aligned it, leveled it, and secured it. One piece at a time. As the sun lowered and shadows stretched across the yard, we stepped back to look at the section we'd finished straight. Solid, done right. For the first time in years, Matthew smiled. Not forced, not guarded. Proud. He looked at the fence, then at me. Dad? Yeah? We'll get through this. I nodded. Yes, we will. Not because forgiveness erases the past, not because the damage magically disappears, but because sometimes, as every soldier knows, redemption is built slowly, deliberately, and shoulder to shoulder. The fence stood there, new wood against old soil proof. Not of perfection, but of effort. And sometimes effort is the beginning of everything worth saving.